And that brings us to a guy who sat for 3 years in Green Bay behind Aaron Rodgers. Now, Jordan Love had 38 games of experience at Utah State, limited experience at the NFL level. We saw him pressed into duty last year during the second half of a Sunday night game between the Packers and the Eagles. He had to play in the COVID toe game for Aaron Rodgers back in 2021, and people think he stunk in that game, but he really wasn't as bad as people think. But that's where we are now in Green Bay. He's in the process of taking over, and quarterbacks coach Tom Clements, who goes all the way back to Brett Favre. He's bridged all three of these guys, from Favre to Rodgers to pushed out to comes back from retirement at Rodgers' behest, and now he's there to get the most out of Jordan Love. What Clements said this week as it relates to the overall development of Love and whether or not he can become the next guy in this chain of quarterbacks in Green Bay, great quarterbacks, Hall of Fame quarterbacks, you can't put a time on it. He needs to get out there and play. We need to see what he can do. He needs to see what he can do. You develop confidence. You figure out how to read defenses. You figure out your pre-snap adjustments, how to properly study film, how to lead others. It's something that isn't immediate, and there isn't any magical moment where you expect it to happen. But they clearly believe, Peter, he's got the potential to become the guy, or they wouldn't have done what they did 3 years ago when they traded up in round one to get him.
I think the reason, Mike, why people are a little down on Jordan Love after that Kansas City game. First of all, my recollection, the Packers only put up one touchdown in that game. It was 14-7, 13-7, something like that. And they lost the game. But I think why people would be down on him in that game is it was mostly a dink and dunk experience for Jordan Love. And in the NFL, you've got to be a little bit better than that. You've got to stretch the field, and he knows that. And I think he'll be much more ready to do that. I think the Jordan Love you saw in the game against Philadelphia with an excellent defense he was facing on the road, and I forget his numbers in the game, but he looked like an NFL quarterback. And when I watched that game, what I remember saying to myself is, I bet this really emboldens Brian Gutekunst and maybe even Matt LaFleur. But what it comes down to, honestly, whether you're emboldened, whether you're not, is having the trust and the faith that the Green Bay way of training quarterbacks. It's like Brian Gutekunst told me a couple of weeks ago. He said, we believe in a certain way. You draft a quarterback, you develop him, he sits for a while, and when he's ready to play, you play him. You don't wait. So, Mike, remember, you may not remember this, but it's really kind of emblazoned, on my head. I remember the weekend of the draft when Jordan Love was taken. And on Sunday, after the draft was over, I got Gutekunst on the phone. And I asked him, I said, man, I think your quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, still has some prime left. And what happens if Aaron Rodgers is really good and you never end up playing Jordan Love? If Aaron Rodgers keeps the job another 4, 5, 6 years, and he goes, if that happens, that'll be good for the Packers. And look, there's a lot of people who will say that the last 3 years overall have been okay for the Packers, but not great. I would dispute that. I would just simply say that your quarterback won 2 MVPs. Your quarterback led this team to 2 top seeds in the NFC, and I totally understand that they did not play well in either of the final games at Lambeau Field. That, either against Tampa, the year that Tampa Bay won the Super Bowl, or against San Francisco, last season. And I get it. So everybody is disappointed, and we're ready to move on from Aaron Rodgers. I do not think it's a bad idea to move on from Aaron Rodgers, especially with the deal that Brian Gutekunst got, because he got an excellent deal for Aaron Rodgers based on a guy who's entering his age 40 season. But what I am saying is that although I definitely think it was the right decision to make, and it was the right deal to make, to swap out Aaron Rodgers in favor of Jordan Love, that guarantees nothing. And though the history says, hey, after some struggles with Brett Favre, you had a Hall of Fame quarterback. After some struggles with Aaron Rodgers in 2008, you had a Hall of Fame quarterback. I have no idea what Jordan Love is going to be. Neither do you. Neither does Brian Gutekunst. You can have confidence, but that is one of the great mysteries. Mike, you know what? One of the 5 great stories of this NFL season, no matter what happens, can Jordan Love walk, chew gum, and play quarterback at a high level at the same time?
And when you consider Aaron Rodgers, it took him a while to get going. 2008 wasn't spectacular. By 2009, they were in the playoffs.
Right.
They lost in the wild card round, an epic roller coaster game where he actually had his face mask yanked when he fumbled the ball that was scooped up by, I believe, either Carlos Dansby applied the face mask or recovered the ball and took it in, or both. And then next year, he's Super Bowl MVP. It shows you how quickly the light can come on. And for the Packers, they expect that Jordan Love is going to have some sort of ascension. They don't know what the ceiling is. Nobody knows what the ceiling is. We never know what the ceiling is for any quarterback, but they saw enough in Love to trade up to get him. Now, their plan back in 2020 was plan A, Justin Jefferson. Plan B, Brandon Ayuk. Plan C, we trade up and we get Jordan Love. So it's not like they had been eyeballing him as this guy that was a can't-miss superstar that they had to go get. They were looking at the receiver position before they decided Jordan Love is our guy, and now we all find out this year. And back to that Chiefs game, just for folks who are wondering, he was 19 for 34 that day, 190 passing yards, averaged 5.59 yards per attempt. That's to Peter's dink and dunk point. And Matt LaFleur, the coach of the team, this was a point I think Sims made earlier in the week when we were discussing Jordan Love. He has said he regrets what he did by way of calling that game. He may have been a little too cautious with Jordan Love and not operate with that kind of go out and let it rip that we saw when he replaced Aaron Rodgers during that Sunday night against the Eagles this past season.
You know, one thing I like when Jordan Love had his press conference, whenever it was last week, I don't remember when it was, but there was one soundbite that I heard that I really liked, and probably nobody paid attention to it other than me. But somebody asked him, how did you feel when Aaron Rodgers signed that gigantic deal? That, look, Mike, you and I, nobody thought that was a 1-year contract with the Packers. That sure didn't look like any typical 1-year deal. But and Jordan Love said, you know, and I forget his exact words, but he was disappointed that he wanted to play. And he just thought, well, this is another way that I won't play. And who knows? I'm sure it's going through his mind. Maybe I'm not going to be Green Bay's quarterback. Maybe I'll be the Jets quarterback. Maybe I'll be Washington's quarterback. Or maybe I'm going to have to go and battle somebody for a job. But maybe I'm not going to be the quarterback here. And Mike, you know, the one thing I realize, there are certain things that people who look at the Green Bay Packers and who look at Matt LaFleur, they might say, well, look, what is Matt LaFleur really proven? Okay, he's proven he can win when Aaron Rodgers is playing at an MVP level. But, okay, let's see him lift the team up by the bootstraps. And let's see him design game plans for a new quarterback who's never been a full-time starter in the NFL. Let's see how he does now. And I think this is a tremendous opportunity because, look, I know I talk to defensive coaches who scheme against the Packers, and they all, to a person, they all will say, hey, Aaron Rodgers, he's next level, he's this, he's unbelievable. But they really like the way it is schemed there. And, you know, I remember Tom Brady once telling me about the offense in New England where he said, you know, I don't micromanage. I run the plays they call. You know, he's not in the office banging his fist on the desk and say, hey, let's run this. Sure, he'll talk to Josh McDaniels and before that to Bill Belichick. But I think it's the same way in Green Bay, that Aaron Rodgers had some wants, had some wishes, but he did not micromanage this offense. That was Matt LaFleur's baby. And so to me, I really think this is a great opportunity, not only for Jordan Love, but for Matt LaFleur to show that he is right up there with the McVays, and that I can take a young quarterback and I can finish molding him into a good to excellent NFL starting quarterback. I'm sure that that's going through the mind of Matt LaFleur.
Well, and I also think, Peter, that Matt LaFleur has proven himself in a different sort of way. 13 wins in 3 straight seasons, despite being the guy caught in the middle of the dysfunction that existed openly, eventually, between Aaron Rodgers and the front office. And dating back to 2019, his first season, Aaron Rodgers launches a very calculated effort in the media to pressure Matt LaFleur to give Aaron Rodgers more freedom at the line of scrimmage. The audible thing was a thing, and it was calculated, in my opinion, by Rodgers to get his way, to give him the power. And it wasn't that long ago that there were reports that Nathaniel Hackett, one of the reasons things didn't go well for him in Denver last year, he was too deferential to the quarterback because he didn't want a repeat of what he lived through in 2019 when he was the first-year offensive coordinator of the Packers, and he saw the way that Aaron Rodgers didn't like the way things were going, the way he asserted himself, and the issues it caused. Matt LaFleur's got none of that now with Jordan Love. Matt LaFleur's got clean slate, run the offense the way I want. I don't have to worry about the delicate genius telling me what he wants and how he wants it. I have a guy who's going to do what I want, how I want. A lot of people have the Packers as down this year. I think the Packers are going to be just fine, in large part because so many people think they're going to be down. I think they're going to surprise people, Peter, and I think we're going to see why they were able to win 13 games 3 straight years when Matt LaFleur was trying to fend off all this stuff that was going on within the Packers organization.
Mike, one of the things, I remember looking at this at the end of the year. And look, I'm not somebody who looks at a number and says, man, this is awful, this is terrible, this is this. But I think people have to understand what happened in 2019 or 2022 in Green Bay. And, I remember being in training camp and watching Aaron Rodgers try to get familiar with Christian Watson, Aaron Dobbs, and obviously he had new important receivers. And I think we realized something about, you were harping on it from the start, but I think we realized something about the importance of an off-season program. Because, nobody has talked about this, and I don't think it's the be-all, end-all stat. But, Mike, did you know that last year, in his starting career for the Green Bay Packers, last year, Aaron Rodgers had his worst year in 2 categories. 1, passing yards per game. 2, passer rating. He had the lowest passer rating of his starting career, 91-something. And he threw for 217 passing yards a game. What's amazing is that Aaron Rodgers played all season, a 17-game season. And he threw for whatever it was, 3,600 yards. And that is unbelievable to me, that Aaron Rodgers would have that kind of year. And when you think about how different a year that had been from just very recently, you just say, okay, we're proven right. It's time to move on. Mike, I want to just say one final thing about Rodgers in Green Bay. I believe that Brian Gutekunst in the winter made every effort, and I mean every effort, to try to build one final bridge for one final season with Aaron Rodgers. And he tried to build that bridge, and on the other side, the form of architecture that Brian Gutekunst was trying just didn't work with Aaron Rodgers. And the Packers became convinced, I believe, I'll always believe this, that the Packers became convinced, look, if Rodgers is not eager about coming back, if he's not willing to meet us halfway, whatever, then it's time to go. There's no sense in crying over this, but it's time to go. So let's go out and make our best deal. And quite honestly, Mike, I said it again a few minutes ago. Or I'll say it again after I said it a few minutes ago. I just think that the deal that the Green Bay Packers made to get pick, whatever it was, 42 or 43 this year, and if Rodgers is healthy, to get a 1 in next year's draft, is just, for a guy entering his age 40 season, and to offload a huge amount of that salary cap damage. Look, Mike, after they are on the hook for $40 million in dead money this year, which is not nothing, as you know, obviously, but honestly, with the money that Jordan Love is making at the low end of the quarterback spectrum, you can afford to take that haircut for one season. And then next year, they'll be back at ground zero and able to build an absolutely normal team. So I just think this worked out pretty well for the Green Bay Packers.
And to put one final point on it, Peter, it started, in your opinion, or at least in your estimation, a year ago as just another effort by me to create some urgency in May when I was harping on the absence of Aaron Rodgers as all of these new receivers need to get up to speed post Davante Adams. But you made the point during the season that after the 2022 campaign ends, the Packers need to say, we need you here next year. If you're going to do this, we need to do this right. And to the point you just made, I suspect that they got the impression, based on all these issues in tracking him down and this whole goofy thing that he now says, well, you know, my Wi-Fi doesn't work, or my cell signal isn't good, or whatever bogus excuse he was making to make it look like it wasn't his fault and it's all the Packers. It was completely ridiculous. But they got the impression during these struggles to try to get the guy on the phone, he's never going to give us the commitment we need. To your point from last year, he's never going to be here. He's never going to do the things that we need to have one last great season from him. So let's take what we can and move on.
It was over in Green Bay. Sometimes you have to know that. And no matter what happens this year, and no matter whether Aaron Rodgers is MVP with the New York Jets and Jordan Love flames out and, you know, is benched by Thanksgiving, no matter what happens, sometimes in life, it's time to move on. This was one of those times. The Green Bay Packers were the adults in the room, and they said basically, listen, it's time to go. It's time for Aaron Rodgers to go and have the second chapter of a great career. And, you know, look, I remember, and Mike, I remember this vividly, the enmity that Brett Favre felt for the Packers in 2008. Oh, it was, and you always would wonder, how can Favre ever step foot back in Lambeau? And then, Mike, he comes in wearing the purple of the Minnesota Vikings. How in the world, twice that happened, that he walks into Lambeau and people are burning his jersey in the parking lot, his old Packers jersey. So I remember just thinking to myself, man, it's going to be about 2047 before Favre ever walks back into Lambeau and they put his name in the ring next to Paul Hornung and Vince Lombardi and Jim Taylor. But honestly, Mike, you know what happens in football? I'm constantly reminded of what a short-term memory that everyone has. And I'll tell you this story. I remember when Jerry Rice, I think he was 42 years old, was in Denver Broncos training camp. And he looked every bit of 42. And Mike Shanahan, I remember, he knew he was going to have to cut Jerry Rice unless he just said, okay, I understand. It's time to go. And the day that I was at training camp, he was being covered by a free agent cornerback from the Mid-American Conference. And I just said to myself, this is not going to take long. And everybody on the outside is saying, Jerry Rice is ruining his legacy. It's awful. It's terrible. And I will guarantee you, 6 years later, when he's on the podium in Canton, Ohio, with his yellow jacket on, his gold jacket on, and he's talking about, and they're introducing him as the greatest receiver of all time, and all that, and everything is wonderful, and Eddie DeBartolo is sitting there, and Montana, and all that stuff. If you had taken a poll and said, what was Jerry Rice's last NFL team? Who is he? What uniform did he wear last? I will bet 98 out of 100 people, even in the shrine of football, in the audience that day, would not have known it was the Denver Broncos. And my only point about all this is Brian Gutekunst, Aaron Rodgers, they're not going out for dinner anytime soon. But at some point, Brian Gutekunst is going to stand there on the field along with Matt LaFleur or whoever is the head coach at the time, and Mark Murphy or whoever is the team president at the time, and they're going to shake hands, and they're going to tell the crowd, let's go, everybody up, everybody up. And they won't even need that motion, Mike, because everyone at Lambeau Field will be on their feet cheering for Aaron Rodgers, because they won't remember the silly argument over testing positive. They won't remember all the Joe Rogan stuff. They won't remember, I didn't have cell service in my house. They won't remember that. You know what they'll remember? They'll remember him shredding a defense and winning the Super Bowl and making that great pass to Greg Jennings in said Super Bowl and going to Chicago in the NFC Championship game and slaying the Bears. And that's what people are going to remember, because we are inclined to remember the good things, the positives. And I believe at the end of the day, 8, 9, 10 years from now, when Rodgers is on that field, that is what people will remember.
Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.